Well, welcome to the show. We're back up to full strength now on return from my holiday. Nice to see you both. We'll start at St James's Park, Ogden, where you were to witness Arsenal's late comeback. Obviously, results define the narrative always. 2 goals from corners, but did they deserve it? It came very, very late. Did we kind of learn anything new about Arsenal, do you think?
Well, we learned they can deal with the pressure because before you go into the game, and obviously Liverpool losing on Saturday, the big question was now, can Arsenal take advantage of Liverpool slipping up? We know that Arsenal have lost at Liverpool this season. They drew at home to Man City. So there have been a few questions about their resilience, their resolve, their ability to show they can handle it. And they did that. And they did it in difficult circumstances. Obviously, Newcastle away is one of the toughest games for anybody on the calendar. They're such a tough physical team. Newcastle scored the first goal. Arsenal had a penalty shout turned down in the first half when Nick Pope seemed to have fouled Victor Gyökeres. So they had a lot of adversity to overcome. And despite the fact that Mikel Arteta probably got his team wrong again at the start, he managed to salvage it by making the right substitutions. The subs made a big impact with the goals. Mourinho scored, Odegaard and Martinelli played a big role in the other goal as well. So I think ultimately Arsenal were asked a lot of questions and they answered them in a positive way by winning at Newcastle.
What did you make of Victor Gyökeres? As you say, he probably should have won a penalty, or certainly thought he'd won a penalty. He's got 3 goals already in the league, but I would say there were 1 or 2 grumblings about whether he's quite up to it. He obviously needs a period of adjustment. What did you make of him?
Yeah, I've seen a bit of Gyökeres recently, and I don't think he's top quality as a centre forward. He's not in the Erling Haaland or Lewandowski or Alexander Isak bracket. But you look at the strikers that have moved this summer, he's probably doing better than Benjamin Sesko at Man United, who Arsenal looked at. The thing at Newcastle, Gyökeres he's big in ways like of an old school centre forward. He's very kind of burly, and I think he's 6'2", but he looked like he was absolutely dwarfed by the Newcastle defenders. He had 4 defenders throughout the game. I think Dan Burn, we had Botman, who's huge, Malik Chow, and at the end of the game, they put on Jamal Lascelles, and each one took it in turns to basically give Gyökeres a bit of a battering. And he stood up to it, he dealt with it, he kept coming back for more. But you want a little bit more than that from an Arsenal centre-forward. I mean, he's no Thierry Henry, let's put it that way, but he has got heart, he has got the ability to run. He run all day, and I thought he was unlucky with the penalty shot because, is VAR really being used correctly to intervene on a decision like that? Because it certainly wasn't a clear and obvious error by the referee. In real time, it looked like Nick Pope took him out of the game. Gyökeres had to take evasive action to avoid being fouled by Pope. And there's a very, very, very slight touch by Pope on the ball after Gyökeres had gone down. So, listen, that's debatable. But he didn't score a goal, but I think he brought something to the team in terms of his work rate. But, like you say, overall, is that enough to be an Arsenal centre-forward? I think probably not, but he has to keep scoring the goals against the lesser teams at home, which he's been doing, and that might be what gets them over the line in the end.
And what was Arteta like afterwards? I mean, there's a lot of focus on him now. The club have spent more than £260 million again this summer. Big outlay, the heavy investment, also in terms of numbers in the squad. And the sort of focus is shifting towards how can he manage it. Did he kind of acknowledge maybe that he got anything wrong previously, or anything had changed, or was there any sign of any of that, or was it all, I knew this was all going to happen and it's all part of my master plan?
Mate, how long have you been covering Arsenal, Mikel Arteta? 5 years? Has he got anything wrong?
Look, it was nice to ask someone else the question.
I'm not sure he's ever admitted to get anything wrong. So obviously during your holiday, I've seen Arsenal 3 times. I saw him in Bilbao against City and at Newcastle, and I was actually quite impressed with Bilbao over the period that run of games. Certainly in Bilbao, I think he's got a new charisma and a confidence this summer, whether it's because of the money that's been spent and the signings that he's been made, or if he looks at his squad and realises that he has got, apart from maybe a replacement for Martin Odegaard, a cover for every position. I think he knows he's got a real chance at the title. And he was a bit tetchy after the City game last week, but obviously Arsenal should have probably won that game and ended up with a draw. But obviously at Newcastle at the weekend, he didn't make much of the penalty incident because Arsenal won. And he didn't really fall for I made the wrong team selection at the start. So he was certainly not admitting to any fault. He was just talking up the fact that there are certain games and certain moments in the season which can define a season, and you have to answer certain questions. And he was basically saying, look, we've done that. We've been to Newcastle, a ground where they'd lost the last 3 games without scoring in all competitions, and they stood up to it. So he was pretty happy after the game yesterday, and rightly so, because they've closed the gap to Liverpool to 2 points. They've shown the title race on. I think he knows over the course of a season they've got a real chance.
as you say, Oggy, they've cut that gap to 2 points because, of course, Liverpool lost at Crystal Palace. Rob, how much? I mean, we're only, what are we, 5-6 games into the season, so we can't be talking about hope for the rest. But do you think that result had been coming for Liverpool and maybe expose a few frailties that those late goals that they'd scored previously had masked?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the late goals, you keep scoring them, and people sort of say, "Oh, it's the mark of champions," which, in a sense, is true. But also, it's not really sustainable to carry on winning games like that week after week. Now, Liverpool have done really well to eke out as many late goals as they have done, but maybe there was a feeling that a result like that was coming, perhaps not in that way, in that they've scored a late goal themselves to get them back in the game and hopefully draw the game, or hopefully on their part draw the game 1-1, and then have gone and conceded right at the last minute. I think Slot was quite honest in his post-match stuff and sort of said that if any team deserved to win, it probably was Palace. And Palace were outstanding in the first half and could have been 2 or 3 goals clear by half-time. It was only really sort of Liverpool's late push that got them back into the game at all. I thought Eddie Nketiah takes that goal at the end absolutely fantastically. I mean, it's a really, really tough chance. I mean, it doesn't look it when you watch on the highlights, but the ball comes to him really quickly. That touch to kind of chest it down and smash his finish into the net at that stage of the game is terrific. And obviously, you have to remember that it's not, it's a Palace team who are absolutely sort of flying at the moment. Liverpool have had trouble with them in the past, notably in the Community Shield. So maybe the result in that sense isn't a massive surprise. I think in general terms of sort of the Premier League, it's good because I think people are starting to think that maybe Liverpool are going to kind of run away with it a little bit, particularly when you would expect at some stage their new signings to really bed in with Florian Wirtz and Alexander Isak are obviously still trying to get up to speed. I think if Liverpool were to start winning sort of 8, 9, 10 games on the bounce, it perhaps would have made the title race quite boring by the time you get halfway through the season. I think that Liverpool losing, Arsenal winning in the manner that they did adds an extra sort of layer of excitement to it all, even though it's only the end of September. But I do think it's important just for the Premier League in general that Liverpool are shown that they can be beaten.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of that game, and I got the impression that the Palace game was the game where all of Liverpool's problems this season came to a head, and I think we've been waiting for that. There was 2 ways to look at Liverpool at the start. It was like they're so good they're going to run away with the league, or they're getting away with it. And I thought they were getting away with it a little bit. Everyone's talked about the players that they brought in, but we haven't really focused on the players they've lost. They've lost certainly lost the fullback in Trent. Andy Robertson has barely played because he's been playing Kirkers. And they've lost, obviously, up front, 3 or 4 players through different reasons, obviously, including the Diogo Jota tragedy. And I think there's a lot of elements of it settling down right now. And I don't think Frimpong is anywhere near as reliable as Trent was, and Trent wasn't that reliable. And Slot made a point of digging him out for going walkabout for the killer goal that Palace scored. Now, Kirkers has struggled. You've got definitely issues at centre-half where Konate's really struggled this season defensively. I think in midfield, they can be overrun with if Wirtz is in the side, and Wirtz has struggled to settle in. So there are a few issues there that begin to bubble up, and I think Arne Slot is looking like he's not as happy as he was last season. I think he knows that he's got a job on his hands now. He's maybe got players in that aren't as good as the ones that they're replacing, and it'll take time, but they don't necessarily always come good. So it'll be interesting to see how Liverpool react to that, because they've got Galatasaray in Istanbul on Tuesday, which obviously a lot of travel involved there. Then it's Chelsea away at the weekend. Now, Chelsea have had a difficult couple of weeks, and they really need to get a result at home at Stamford Bridge. Otherwise, the press will start to mount on Enzo Maresca with the fans. So all of a sudden, Liverpool got a tricky week. And I think, you know Arsenal better than any of us, James. Do you think Arsenal now see this week as a real chance for them to turn the screw on the title race because of the situation that Liverpool might find themselves in?
Yeah, and also because they've had a very, very difficult start, right? I mean, we know going to Old Trafford isn't necessarily the difficult game it once was, but Arsenal have got a bad record there, so that was a tough start for them. They've obviously already played City. They've had to go to Newcastle. They've had tough games, and obviously the flip side of that is they know they're going to get a run where they can really go and put a sequence of results together to put huge pressure on the rest. And okay, West Ham are going to have a new manager. In Nuno Espirito Santo, but they're not in a great place at the moment. That game is at the Emirates at the weekend on Saturday. You'd assume, that is a home banker really, and they've got a few of those coming up. And you can sort of see if they can get into a winning habit and kind of silence those doubts. That's why I think Sunday could be quite significant for them, because there was this sort of argument starting to build about whether Arteta can actually use this squad to maximum effect to actually get them playing on the front foot. Well, they're going to have to play on the front foot in these sequence of games, because they're going to come up probably against sides who are going to play 4-5 at the back and low block, camp on the edge of their own box, have to break them down. And those are games where they have struggled. So, remember that they drew, I think was it 14 Premier League games last season, and a lot of them were those where they couldn't create enough. They didn't, they take those chances when they came. So there is a test ahead for them, but the fixture list, having looked very tough, now does look quite inviting. Yeah.
Also, we're going to leave the title race now, head back to the wacky races, which involves Rob going to watch Man United on Saturday at Brentford. So, Rob, the pre-match talk was how United can build on the Chelsea win back-to-back games for the first time under Ruben Amorim, back-to-back league games, and then go into the Sunderland game, win again, and all of a sudden they're challenging for the top four. But obviously it didn't go that way. They lost to Brentford. Another kind of shambolic, chaotic defeat. So, I mean, how long has Ruben Amorim got? I mean, it's his 50th game in charge against Sunderland at the weekend. Will that be his last?
Well, I mean, United privately are still saying that he's got the support of the board and Sir Jim Radcliffe, and obviously that can't go on indefinitely. I was at Brentford on Saturday. The worry from Amorim's point of view, I felt that for the first time, well, not the first time, but they looked particularly disorganised and ragged at times against Brentford, and I didn't really get that sense when they lost to Arsenal or City. I know that they've lost both those games, but I didn't feel like they were disorganised, and they did look like that at times at Brentford. Obviously the focus is again on Amorim and his record, which is poor, and he acknowledges that himself. That from my point of view, this to me is just, we've seen this so many times at the end of managers at Man United. It's a cycle that's been going on for sort of 10 years, and it just feels like there's a huge disconnect at the moment between United's history and the expectation around the club and actually what their reality is right now, and because that disconnect is so huge, it forces mistakes on and off the pitch, and that creates pressure, and it just feels like it's just a club paralysed by fear at the moment. And it was interesting afterwards that Amorim kind of hinted at that a little bit. He said that he knew exactly the way that Brentford were going to play, that they prepped to deal with that all week. He said that they trained, in his opinion, really well. But then what he'd seen on the training pitch, they just couldn't replicate it on the pitch. And he was asked in his post-match presser about why that was, and he just said it's just the pressure of the club. And you do start to wonder whether it is becoming this kind of impossible job now. And obviously, if this carries on and results carry on in the same vein, that Ruben Amorim will have to lose his job, whether you think he deserves more time or not, or whether you think he's had the right tools or not. It's always a manager. History tells you that it's always a manager that pays a price. But there has to be a real concern now with people at Man United that even if they were to get someone else in, that things may not change markedly anyway, because it's just become this absolute nightmare job now, where I'm not sure that anyone can come in and really turn it around, because Amorim's the latest in a long line of managers who have tried and have struggled with this. We're going to talk about Jose Mourinho later. He was kind of billed as a serial winner, and he couldn't do it. They've had Ten Hag and Van Gaal and Solskjaer, all these different type of coaches brought in for different types of reasons, and have all encountered the same problem. I genuinely, if United have to sack Ruben Amorim, I genuinely don't know where they go and how they get out of this kind of hole that they've dug for themselves over the last decade.
I just think that, you look at the last three appointments, Amorim, Ten Hag and Solskjaer, they're all inexperienced at the highest level. I mean, very inexperienced in Solskjaer's case, but even Ten Hag had come from Ajax and hadn't managed at elite level, and it showed, and it's the same with Amorim, it's shown. I think there's an incident before the game, you would have seen it, Rob. United were warming up at Brentford, and they were going through their set pieces. They were basically practicing for half an hour how to deal with throw-ins and corners. And it was like, well, you're basically telling Brentford that you're scared of their throw-ins and you're scared of their set pieces, and it's the weirdest thing to see a team going through that training routine in front of the opposition when they should have done it on the training pitch Thursday, Friday. Now, they may have done, but to show your hand before the game, it's just, madness. But anyway, James, I want to ask you a question because I'm just going through some numbers here. Amorim's win rate in the Premier League is 27.3%. His points per game is 1.03. He's lost more games than he's won. Lost 17, won 9. I mean, in terms of goals, scored 39, conceded 53. There's not a single stat there that suggests any kind of progression or improvement. Are we just kind of just waiting for the inevitable to happen here with Ruben Amorim?
If he's not prepared to change, then yes, because the whole point about this season for Manchester United was that they had a chance to reset. They were out of Europe. They had to cut their cloth accordingly. They were doing a lot over the summer of sort of streamlining the squad, moving on players they felt rightly or wrongly were either not good enough or were causing trouble behind the scenes or not the right characters or however they wanted to depict it. And what they needed from their manager, therefore, was to cut his cloth accordingly. And he hasn't done that. He's decided that he is going to live or die by his system and his methodology. And what I don't understand about Ruben Amorim is that he's not adapted to his surroundings at all. He's asking a club that is disparate, that is broken, that is low on confidence, lacking identity, to mould themselves around something that is his and his alone. And you can argue that, you know, managers, they all have philosophies these days and they all want a certain way of playing, but they have to build towards that. And you know, the comparison I still think is right between Arsenal and Manchester United, because both of those managers both of those clubs had iconic managers who were there for 2 decades or more. And how have they dealt with that era? Now, obviously, Arsenal had Unai Emery. They've had this sort of period with Mikel Arteta where it wasn't quite working, and now they're on the brink of potentially winning a title. Obviously, United have had a lot longer. It's been over a decade. They've not made any real progress in their time. But what Arteta has done, which is what I think Amorim can learn from, is that he recognised the players he had, he recognised the issues within the club, but he played a pragmatic style of football to get him results, to build the platform to then go and impose what he wanted to do. He called it his 5-phase plan. It seemed as though Ruben Amorim has a 1-phase plan, which is you're going to play my way and we're just going to keep doing it until it works. And we're going to buy players that fit it and eventually it'll all come together. And it's that inflexibility that is absolutely killing him. And if he does not recognise that, he will be out of a job.
I mean, I just don't think that. I mean, I said before on this podcast, I think last week, that I think that the window for him to kind of be flexible with his system has been and gone. I think there was a chance for him to do it last season when he really was under the cosh, but because he's so wedded to it, I just don't think that in terms of the actual basic tactical structure, you can argue whether he wants to be flexible within that or not, but in terms of the basic tactical structure, he's just not going to flinch. And in his defence, I just don't think that he's had the tools to be successful in that job. And if you're Man United in the recruitment department and you're not going to supply every single piece of the puzzle that he needs to make that system work, the system that he's told you already he's not going to change, if you're not going to supply him with every single piece, and by that I mean a midfielder and a number one goalkeeper, then it seems really harsh to say after 6 games, oh, actually it's not working, you've got to go. Because you must have known that. You must know that you need a central midfielder, a new central midfielder who's going to cover a lot of ground to make that system work. And so it can be no surprise to people at Man United, to Jason Wilcox and people in the recruitment department, to look at the results and go, oh, actually, we've lost that one because we haven't got that midfielder. I just think that we're in this kind of, I don't know, this storm again now where Amorim is ultimately going to pay the price for results, and United are going to put that statement out and go, oh, thank you, Ruben, for your hard work, but it just didn't work out. And Ruben Amorim is going to look at that and go, well, yeah, but you didn't help me. Like, you didn't give me everything I needed to make that successful, and now you're going to have to start again. And I appreciate the only way around that is for United to go, actually, we're going to give you the season, and come out and say it right now. So we're going to give you the season, we're going to give you January, we're going to give you next summer, and then we'll see. Obviously, in the modern age, that doesn't really happen with football managers, because they know that if you lose again and again and again, that you just can't survive that pressure, and it's the manager that has to go.
There comes a tipping point, though, doesn't it? I mean, you're right what you're saying, Rob, but results and lack of points and everything all mounts up. And I think we're getting to that point now. We're getting to the situation where it really cannot go on because United are tracking relegation form. It sounds ridiculous, but in terms of points per game, they are relegation form. So, James, you mentioned Mikel Arteta, but I think Eddie Howe's another comparison. He went to Newcastle with a squad that was way inferior to Man United, and he just transformed that squad with not a lot of initial input, but he just got onto the training pitch, worked with the players, was pragmatic, found a way for them to play. People like Dan Burn and Joe Linton were laughed at by Newcastle fans and other clubs prior to, Eddie. I know Eddie Howe brought Dan Burn in, but it was like, well, these players are now, Dan Burn's an England international, Joe Linton's been a fantastic player, Miguel Almiron was another player that he transformed. Ruben Amorim hasn't made a single Man United player better. He's actually made them worse. So, I can't think of any positive to say.
Well, let's end on that upbeat note, the Manchester United chat. When we come back from a break, we'll be talking about Jose Mourinho and his return to Stamford Bridge.
Okay, so we're now going to talk about Jose Mourinho. He's back at Stamford Bridge on Tuesday as the new Benfica coach. And with us, we've got Portuguese-based journalist Tom Kundert from Portugal.net. Tom, you've worked around Mourinho for many years now. So just tell us about the impact of his return to Benfica. It kind of caught us all by a little bit by surprise.
Yeah, well, it's made a huge impact here in Portugal, as you can imagine. Everyone's really excited. I think it's really good for Portuguese football. It puts a lot more eyes on Portuguese football. I think it's really good for Mourinho as well. It's giving him chance to be at a club which is in the Champions League, to be at a club which can fight for, win the league realistically. Whether or not it's good for Benfica, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's just, he was announced a couple of weeks ago, and really every day has just been dominating the sports papers pretty much ever since then.
So just talk us through, Jose's backstory. We all know the real backstory of, Chelsea, Real Madrid, Inter Milan, but prior to being at Porto, he had a very brief spell at Benfica in the first place. And I guess the manner of his kind of departure from Benfica led him to Porto and the start of the story. So what happened at the first time around at Benfica?
Yeah, so that was actually his first job. As of course everyone knows, he started off as the assistant to Bobby Robson, and then his first job as a head coach was at Benfica. He did quite well there. They were in a real dip. They had a terrible time for years really before he went there. He seemed to be turning it round, but he only ended up having 10 games because they were in the middle of their presidential elections, or they were just coming up to their presidential elections. And that 10th game he had was actually probably his best game. They beat Sporting 3-0. And apparently he went into the presidential candidate and insisted that he give him an improved contract or a longer contract. That didn't come to pass. The next president who was elected decided to go with someone else. And so that was the end of Jose Mourinho at Benfica, kind of really brief tenure, but fairly successful, but nothing too spectacular. And then you're right. Yeah, he went off to União de Leiria, smaller club in Portugal. That's when he first really started showing he was quite something special. He did amazing work there. A very small club, really modest club, got them to their highest finish, fourth and fifth in 2 seasons running. Porto came in for him, and yeah, the rest was history. The best 2 seasons in Porto's history, without a doubt, winning the UEFA Cup, winning the Champions League, absolutely cleaning up in Portugal. Every single trophy they won of the 6 trophies, apart from one cup final against Benfica, curiously. And then, of course, went to Chelsea, all the success there, went to Inter Milan, all the success there. I think you have to say in that period, 5, 6, 7-year period, he was without doubt the best manager in the world. And so obviously made everyone here in Portugal very proud. His career since then, of course, everyone's followed it closely just because of the character he is, as well as his achievements. And so, yeah, when he came back to Portugal, yeah, just everyone was, really excited, big name back in the league. Let's see what he can do.
Tom, can I just ask that, obviously you've mentioned there about the heights that he hit as a manager, that as a general view now of him being something of a bit of a fading force, I suppose, particularly with the jobs that he's had to take. Is that shared in Portugal? I know that he's still got that star quality because of his name, but in terms of his ability as a coach, is he still as revered as he always was in Portugal?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think, people here in Portugal, people are very knowledgeable about foreign football, and especially there's so many Portuguese footballers and managers abroad, and so they keep close track on their careers. And yeah, you just look at his record, and you're absolutely right. There seemed to be a fading force, and even the teams his managed, isn't it? You can say is slightly going down the rung of the ladder. It seems to be every single time. And so, yeah, like I say, I think this is a perfect job for Jose Mourinho. It's interesting. In his press conference, his unveiling press conference, he said he was quite disparaging actually to in relation to Fenerbahce, and he was saying he's back at a club where he belongs. He belongs to be at one of the biggest clubs in the world, and he's now in Benfica. That's where he is. Of course, those are the kind of words which immediately were kind of lapped up by Benfica fans. They like to hear those kind of that kind of praise. So but on the other hand, it's Portuguese football, so it's not one of the major leagues in Europe. So a lot of people here are saying perhaps it's his last chance for redemption, or maybe redemption's not a bit too harsh. His last chance to really show that he can be a top manager among the European elite. If he does something spectacular in Europe, and if he, leads Benfica back to the league. They've only won the league once in the last 4 years. They're in a little bit of a state. So he can kind of, get his reputation back to a much higher point, I think, is his success here.
Tom, you talk about his reputation. Without giving away trade secrets, we're recording this on a Monday morning, and Benfica are training later today, and I know, or tomorrow rather, and I noticed that they have opened up their session entirely, which is something that a lot of clubs don't do. It's very, very rare. Normally they train for 15 minutes with the cameras and then they kick everyone out. How much of an opportunity do you think Mourinho sees this game against Chelsea to sort of put himself back in the spotlight, particularly in England, where obviously he has such a strong affinity?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that's, one of the reasons he took the job immediately, when it was offered to him, because he's going to be in a Champions League, and, such a high profile game this, because of course he's going back to Chelsea. And he, like he said, Mourinho, his kind of star has faded a little bit, but he's lost none of his self-confidence in that unveiling press conference. He said, I'm back where I should be, at the top of the game in Europe, or at the top of the kind of football agenda. I think he just loves the fact that people are talking about him again. And so, he obviously is somebody who, has reached the very top, is used to having people talk about him, having thousands of column inches spoken about him, analysing him in every detail. And that's where he feels comfortable. And he's very happy that he's got the opportunity to, be that again to some extent, certainly.
So, Tom, he's only been in the job, 2 weeks? And I'm going to ask you about his next job now, which is classic Mourinho, I guess. But he's always spoken about wanting to get back in the Premier League. Now, he may see this as an opportunity to do that, but obviously there's also talk prior to the Nations League that had Roberto Martinez not won that competition, that Jose would have replaced him. So, first of all, was that correct, do you think? And do you think he's eyeing up the job of being Portugal coach for the World Cup in 2030, which will obviously be co-hosted by Portugal?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's made no secret that that's his ambition. That's one of his ambitions. He wants to be the Portugal national team coach. And you're absolutely right. I think if Portugal had not won that the Nations League, I think there was a very good chance that he would be the Portugal manager right at this moment. He has been offered a job once or twice, most recently when he was at Roma, and after Fernando Santos was dismissed, and before Roberto Martinez was hired, Mourinho was the Portuguese Football Federation's first choice. But at that time, he'd just won the Conference League at Roma. He looked like he was on a bit of a high there, and he said it wasn't the right time. He subsequently said about a year later or something that was a mistake on his part. he really should have taken the Portugal job at that moment. But yeah, it's definitely on his agenda without a doubt. And to be honest, I think it doesn't matter how well or how badly things go for him at Benfica. I think that job will be waiting for him. Just the sheer weight of his achievements and his name in football and what he's done for Portuguese football, really, in terms of raising its profile. People here in Portugal are very grateful for him, and there's no doubt about it. He will be Portugal manager one day.
Tom, we can't have you on without asking an obvious question about other Portuguese coaches in the headlines right now. I know you watched Ruben Amorim's rise at Sporting quite closely, and you think that United should give him time and just ride out the storm right now because he has got a lot of potential to be a great coach.
Yeah, I'm probably the only person in the football world who still believes that he can turn it around. It's absolutely impossible to underestimate what he did in Portugal and at Sporting. Absolutely incredible. I mean, Sporting had won 2 championships in 40 years before he went there. They were a completely dysfunctional club. If you think Manchester United are dysfunctional now, Sporting were in a even bigger mess. And he came in, he turned it round. I think what really impressed people is the way he, curiously, he's been accused of being inflexible, but he was quite flexible at Sporting, and he just got better year on year. Sporting got better and better. He got them really to the top. They absolutely dominated Portuguese football, won 2 out of 4 leagues when he was there. It would have been 3 out of 5. There's no doubt. Well, they ended up winning that, the league last season. So you can really say Amorim won 3 out of 5 leagues in Portuguese football for Sporting, which is incredible after Benfica and Porto were just so far ahead. But he's such a smart guy. He's such a smart coach. And I think everywhere he's been, especially at Sporting, but even before in his brief spells at Braga and at Casa Pia, everyone talks about the way he manages to forge a kind of really strong team spirit. I think that's a bigger asset that he has, even forgetting about the whole tactical side. And I think he can do that at Manchester United. It's like I was just saying earlier, how long was it before Alex Ferguson won his first trophy at Manchester United? 3 years. You have to give him time, I think. And if he is given time, I'm still confident that he can turn it around, because all his good qualities as a coach in Portugal, they're definitely transferable to England.
Just while we're on Mourinho, just to go back to it, what kind of reception, James, do you think Jose is going to get at Chelsea? I mean, I've been at United games in the past where he was manager, and he got absolute pelters from the stand, and obviously since then he's gone and taken the Spurs job as well. I mean, what kind of reaction are you expecting when he makes his comeback?
Well, I mean, he's obviously been back before, and this will be the first time I think he's been back as an ex-Tottenham manager, which probably won't help his cause. I mean, it will be mixed at best for him. He's been abused at Stamford Bridge in the past, and he's commented on that, reminding them of the titles that he's won there and the success that he gave them. And perhaps for some of the younger Chelsea fans who probably don't maybe remember with such clarity the absolute transformational effect he had, obviously, when the Roman Abramovich era started and the success that he delivered. So yeah, it kind of feeds into the debate we're talking about him in general. Is he's gone from being that really feared, respected figure to almost a pantomime villain, and I think the Chelsea fans will treat him accordingly.
So can we all have our favourite Jose memories? I'll start with you, Tom. Obviously, you've seen it right from the start. So what's your standout Mourinho memory?
My standout Mourinho memory? Oh, there's so many of them, isn't there? But I suppose I still think it's interesting. If you asked him, he said a few times, apart from that kind of, I think it's a little bit of a throwaway line when he said his greatest achievement was taking United to second. I think his greatest achievement is still what he did at Porto. You really cannot underestimate a Portuguese side, just dominating in Europe, becoming the best in the world. So I think my favourite Mourinho moment was really the key moment where he announced himself on World Football, which was, of course, the 2-1 victory at Manchester United in, I think it was the last 16 tie or quarterfinals maybe, in the Champions League in 2004. And when Costinha scored that goal and he just did that famous sprint down the touchline, that kind of announcing himself as a superstar manager. And yeah, I think that's the iconic moments that I most like about Mourinho.
James, don't have to be a good one, it can be a bad one, because I had him at Chelsea as well. So.
Oh, good. Well, do you know what? I'm going to pick the one where he had that shoving match with Arsene Wenger on the touchline at Stamford Bridge, just because and actually around that time, just the specialist in failure comments, and he was the only manager I've really properly seen. I suppose you could argue Fergie, but the only manager who really got under Arsene Wenger's skin almost every week. And I always remember when the Arsene Wenger press conferences, the way they'd set them up is they'd have like a table with a piece of cloth over it that would sort of fall over the front, and it was loose. And whenever Wenger got agitated, he'd move it, he'd shuffle his feet around, and you'd see the cloth moving. And as soon as anyone mentioned Jose Mourinho's name in a press conference, suddenly the feet were twitching. You could see his body language rile up. And it all came sort of out in that one moment at Stamford Bridge when, of course, he walked across from one dugout to the other and shoved Mourinho. And it was just an incredible sort of piece of theatre to be able to be privileged enough to sit sort of 10, 12 rows behind it, as you do at Stamford Bridge, to just watch that and just see that. It was just a remarkable thing.
Go on, Rob.
Yeah, mine's a bit of an odd one, to be honest. It was at an FWA dinner. There was at a hotel in London, and it was a couple of months after Jose had left, or had been sacked by Man United. There was absolutely no reason for Jose to be in that hotel. He has a house down the road, but he was sat in the lobby eating a club sandwich and having a Coke. And a couple of us had spotted Jose, and we kind of went over because we hadn't seen him since he'd been sacked. And just to say, thanks for dealing with us, and we appreciate and good luck for the future. And he insisted that me and this other reporter sat down, and for about 15 to 20 minutes, he absolutely monstered United all over the place about why it had gone wrong, why it wasn't his fault, the signings he didn't get, the players he didn't get out. And it was typical Mourinho. I like to think that he was in that lobby simply because he knew that it was going to be full of a load of journalists, and that it was his way of kind of getting his point across, because the whole kind of narrative had been that he had lost the dressing room and results hadn't been good enough, and it was all his fault and he'd had to go. And I like to think that he kind of planned the whole thing, not for us to, but for any journalist to come and sit with him and just to kind of get his point across. And it was very kind of Mourinho, very kind of cloak and dagger and in the shadows. But I thought he was brilliant for 15 minutes and kind of got his point across and just explained why none of it was his fault.
That's absolutely why he was there. That's 100% why he was there. Listen, I mean, I'm going to end it with some positive stuff on Mourinho, because, listen, we've all been there when he's been horrible and he's been negative, and the atmosphere around clubs has been, toxic at times, certainly United towards the end. But I just can't forget what he was like when he came over to Chelsea, between 2004 and 2007. They were so far ahead. They absolutely terrified Sir Alex Ferguson and Man United. That team he had, it often gets overlooked at Chelsea, that how great that team was, how strong it was. Petr Cech, Carvalho, John Terry, Didier Drogba, Robben, Duff, the great midfield, Essien and Makelele. They were such a great team. And Mourinho raised the bar to a different level. He brought this new sense of charisma to the Premier League. And he really was the special one, wasn't he? For 2-3 years, he was the special one before he became the nasty one. But he really did change the game. And, for me, Mourinho is an absolute icon of the game, good and bad. But, we're glad he's back at Chelsea on Tuesday night. I'm sure it'll be a great occasion. And Tom, thanks for your time. Thanks for your thoughts on Mourinho and Ruben Amorim.
So we've spoken on this pod before about the hectic schedule that professional players face in the modern game. FIFPro, the Players Union, have published their latest report into that exact topic. Mark, you had the pleasure of reading the report. What were the main takeaways from it?
Well, the tagline at the top is overworked and underprotected, and that basically sums up a 51-page report in the terms of too many games, not enough rest, and too much travel as well was another element they mentioned. But also, in addition to this year's report, is the fact that the Club World Cup and the excessive heat and the conditions that players are being asked to play in, and it basically it's a worrying kind of trend that players are playing more games, they're getting less rest, and they're having more injuries. And the Club World Cup has obviously been a big issue because that was a new additions to the calendar. It was a club tournament in the middle of the summer. Now, FIFA will say it's a great success, but we were all there in the summer and there were lots of issues raised. And one issue that FIFA Pro raised before the tournament and during it, and FIFA actually acknowledged it during the tournament, was the kickoff times in places like Florida, the excessive heat that players are playing in, 40-degree plus. I know, James, you were in Philadelphia when it was, freakishly hot in the summer. But FIFA Pro have basically been to FIFA and said, look, we need to talk about this. We need to discuss this before the World Cup next summer so that we don't have the same mistakes at the Men's World Cup when it's a 48-team tournament. FIFA said briefly during the summer that they will play more games in covered stadiums, but since then we've heard nothing, and FIFA Pro, again, have heard nothing from FIFA in terms of let's sit down and discuss this. So in many ways, FIFA Pro know that they're kind of banging their head against a brick wall at times, but they're just basically trying to put the science and the data out there to say, look, if you're not listening to us, fine, but this is the reality of it, and this is why we need to talk about many things in the game right now, many issues that need to be addressed for player well-being.
James, obviously you were at the Club World Cup with Chelsea. Chelsea have had a couple of injuries already this season, Cole Palmer, Liam Delap. Has there been anything from Chelsea about whether they think that they are paying the price for being at that tournament? Obviously, it was a massive success for them because they won it. But there is evidence now to suggest that playing in that tournament is affecting their ability to have their best players fit for the Premier League.
Yeah, and we said on this podcast that would happen. It was inevitable, really, because everybody sticks their head in the sand with this when it comes to actually making a decision on something.
Yeah.
We can all kind of put these ideas out there. FIFA Pro can put these reports out. In fact, I noticed that in the report they quote Mikel Arteta. I've got it here. We've had players who are injured who've played 130 games in the last 2 seasons. So it's an accident waiting to happen when you continue to load and load and load. And it's interesting that they've used that quote because I was in that press conference. And what he also said in that press conference, because I asked him, was, do you actually think anyone's listening when we talk about this? Somebody gets injured, journalists ask the manager about it. Do the players need more protection? Manager says yes, and around we go again. Nothing happens. And Mikel Arteta, to be fair to him, basically said, no one's really listening. They say they are, but they're not. And that is the issue. It's a shame they didn't use that quote in the report, really. But yeah, on Chelsea, of course they're feeling the consequences of this. And Enzo Maresca actually has sort of said, he kind of played it down at the start of the season to sort of say, well, look, no one knows what's going to happen because we've never experienced this before. This is a new thing for everyone, right? This Club World Cup, this expanded team competition going on through the summer in the extreme heat, no one knows. But any scientist, any sports scientist will tell you that is going to have an impact, particularly when, Maresca is not somebody who heavily rotates. He did last season because he had the Conference League where he could completely change the lineup because obviously the strength of that competition was so weak. Whereas now he's got the Champions League. He can't rotate to the same extent. And then it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling problem because you get injuries that then reduce the options, which means you have to load more on the players who've already played, which creates further issues with injuries. Then they get injured, then the squad gets depleted further. So it's a vicious cycle that they're in at the moment. And obviously having gone all the way to the final and won it, that they are affected by it as much as only one other team, of course, PSG.
Mark, I think that most football fans can see the way that this is trending. This season is going to be the second season of an expanded Champions League. We're coming off the back of a Club World Cup. In the summer, there's going to be a 48-team World Cup for the first time. I know that we've spoken about this before. Are we any closer to a solution to this? Because James is right. It's all very well sticking these reports out and saying, oh, look, they're all playing too many games. I think everyone can kind of accept that. But is there a solution? Are we any closer to getting a kind of solution to solve this?
I don't think we are because the coaches and players will say there's too many games. The FIFA Pro will say there's too many games. Well, the people that we never hear from, the club owners who are happy to take the money and the added profile. I mean, the Chelsea owners thought the Club World Cup was great because they suddenly became the world champions, had their picture taken with Donald Trump on the day, the trophy presentation. So from Chelsea's owners' perspective, it's great. But for the players, I mean, Chelsea are a strange example because they turn over players so quickly that maybe they're not bothered about a player having a shorter career, despite the fact they give them long contracts. They'll just buy some others. And I don't see this changing unless players take industrial action. And again, the talk of strike action, we've heard it a lot before, but if players are going to strike, they all have to strike. It's not a case of just some striking, because it wouldn't have the impact. If the Premier League went on strike, then the Championship and the lower leagues would get bigger crowds. It's an opportunity for them. And then somebody told me that why would a player at Accrington Stanley in League Two strike for a multimillionaire footballer, and the player at Accrington Stanley wouldn't get paid, and he's got a mortgage to pay, he's got bills and kids and everything. So why would he go on strike and sacrifice his income just because players who have private jets to get around and business class travel when they need it are playing too many games? It's not going to happen. So they have to find a solution in between. And there's a quote on this call we had with FIFA on Friday, and it's Darren Burgess, who was the former performance consultant at Liverpool and Arsenal. He's now just moved to Juventus from a team in the ARL. And he said, at the moment, you've got the perfect storm of how not to treat a human athlete. Now, what he means is that there's too much travel, not enough rest, excessive heat, too many games. It all contributes eventually to a player getting injured. Now, I've got a list here in front of me. This is all of these players played in the Club World Cup in the summer, and they've all been injured at the start of the season. Desiree Doué, calf injury. Ousmane Dembele, hamstring. Cole Palmer, groin. Trent Alexander-Arnold, hamstring. Marquinhos, thigh. Liam Delap, hamstring. Ait Nouri at Man City, knee. Ryan Cherky at Man City, thigh. Levi Colwill at Chelsea, ACL. Now, that's a lot of players. We're only in September. A lot of players have got significant injuries there, and they all played in the Club World Cup. Now, we asked FIFA Pro about this, and they said, look, we can't prove causality. There's no way they can prove it scientifically, but the anecdotal evidence is there that too many games, not enough rest, is going to lead to injuries, and it's happening. And the problem is, if you're a club owner and your best players aren't playing, then that isn't good for your product or your brand. If your best players are injured, you might not qualify for the Champions League, which means that you're not earning as much money next season. Just ask Man United what it means to be out of the Champions League. It means a lot. So maybe ultimately the only way it can change is if club owners realise it's costing them money to have their best players injured.
James, can you ever see a point at which the players have just had enough and go on strike, or is it just words and talk?
I don't think it's fair that the players are put in that position. This is an issue that needs leadership from the very top of the game. I know Mark's talking about the club owners, but this is where what should be happening is the FIFA president, the UEFA president, CONCACAF, they all sit down, the leagues all sit down and they say, okay, who can give 5% here, 5% there, to make sure that we actually protect the players. But it's never going to happen. You're asking administrators who are only interested in driving revenue to cut revenue to help the main protagonists in their sport, and they're not going to do it. And what I worry about is that it's going to have something really serious happen to a player for some action, for a mandate to be created. Because at the moment, these reports come out, some of the players have talked, really high profile names have talked about striking and strike action and whether that is a feasible possibility. And I'd like to see it, because I think it would make those associations and those individuals stand up and take notice. But it shouldn't be on the players. The players play the game. The game is organised by the administrators, and the administrators should not be loading matches and getting into these little fiefdom battles between FIFA and, you've got the UEFA Champions League. Right, well, I'm going to create my own basic Champions League and put it in the summer, and we're going to hold it in 40-degree heat in America. It's ludicrous what is going on. These organisations are competing with each other while purporting to talk about the love of the game and the power of football and all of this. It's not backed up by their actions. And what we need to be seeing is proper, strong leadership from those at the very, very top of the game to intervene here and just say, do you know what? Money is not the most important thing. Revenue drivers are not the most important thing. We have the most popular sport in the world in a great place, and that's okay. So let's protect that by giving a bit back to the players. But it's just pie in the sky when you get to, when the rubber meets the road.
I think one significant element that was pointed out on the call with FIFA on Friday was that the last two Ballon d'Or winners, you had Rodri, who received his award while recovering from a cruciate ligament injury, sustained a couple of months after playing all the way through to the final of the Euros with Spain. And this year, Ousmane Dembele picked his award up with a hamstring injury, which is going to keep him out for 2 to 3 months, again, on the back of a really busy season last year. So the two best players in the world for the last 2 years have picked up their award while injured. Now, you can imagine that maybe the next 2 or 3 years, Lamine Yamal might win the Ballon d'Or if he stays fit. Now, he's only 18 and already one of the stats in this report shows that he's played almost twice as many games at the age of 18 than the next 18, which is, I think, Kabasi at Barcelona. So he's played, I think, 140 games at the age of 18. So Lamine Yamal might be a Ballon d'Or winner, but he better do it quick, because if he gets to the age of 23, 24, he's going to be hit by injuries, judging by the way it's going for the other players. And, that's the danger, that the biggest stars in the game are not going to be on the pitch. If Lamine Yamal isn't playing often enough, and Dembele and Rodri and, Mbappe's had injuries, Haaland's had injuries, we all want to see the best players. The clubs want to employ the best players. Well, there's no use if they're not on the pitch because they're injured, because they're playing too many games.
James, just one last one then. I know we've talked about solutions and whether there is one. I mean, it actually feels like if anything, it's going to go the other way. FIFA are talking about an expanded Club World Cup because they think that the last one was a success. There's even been talk of expanding the World Cup beyond the 48 teams to 60, I think 60 odd. I mean, if anything's going to change, it's going to be more games, surely, not fewer.
Yeah, it's bleak. It's a really bleak picture, because unfortunately there isn't anyone in a position of authority who's prepared to show leadership on this issue and actually take on the game's power brokers to say, do you know what? Stop making money. You're making enough money. It's all okay. There's enough to go around. I don't love football because FIFA makes a lot of money. No football supporter thinks, I'm so grateful that FIFA have increased their revenues by 25% this year, or UEFA are making more cash now. Isn't that great? They've expanded the Champions League, to this bloated, extra format with the 2 extra group games. Yeah, brilliant. Bring it on. I mean, it's just, it's the game has not got its priorities right. And as I say, what I'm really sort of scared of is that something major is going to happen to a player and everyone's going to go, oh, actually, yeah, we need to do something about it. But it shouldn't take that for something to change.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thanks for listening to the Football Reporters. We'll be back with more next week.